Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 Annual Post Safety Forum. I'm Michelle Ray, Chair of the Post Committee and your host for today. We know it's a busy time for everyone, so we really appreciate everyone taking the time today to join us. I hope you find it worthwhile. I also want to mention we are recording the session, so we can share it with anyone who couldn't make it today, and you can also share it with your own staff afterwards. I'd first like to introduce the Post Committee to everyone and acknowledge them. There are a lot of us. The committee meets several times throughout the year. We also have subcommittees for ad hoc projects that we do, the documentation review, etc. So we're all pretty busy and everyone puts a lot of time and commitment. So I just wanted to thank everyone on the committee for their service. We really appreciate it. And then I'd just like to introduce our speakers and thank them for working on their presentations. So joining me today is Howard Heel, Business Manager at Bar W Petroleum and Electric, Jim Hunter, Health and Safety Advisor at Shell Canada, Anik Westering, Senior Manager, Health and Safety and Environment at BGIS, and Mike Lamont, National HSC Manager at National Energy Equipment, Mike Popolkis, Senior Manager, Health, Safety and Environment for Shell Mobility for BGIS, was also on our agenda to present, but unfortunately couldn't make it today. He's out of town for work, but he does wish he could be here. And all of us as he and all of us on the committee, we're very passionate about Post and what we convey to the Post contractor community. So Anik has graciously stepped in for Mike on the LSR presentation. So thank you, Anik.
Welcome.
I'd also like to thank Howard, Jim, Anik, Mike for all of the work they've put into these presentations. We've had many meetings to discuss these topics and what we wanted to cover. So again, we're very passionate about this. So thank you everyone for your input. So just quickly go over the agenda for today. So we have our new 50 life-saving rules that Post has adopted from the IOGP. Just kidding, April Fools, it's only 9. Our new Post for Site Operators course and completing an effective JSA. And then at the end, we're going to do a little prize draw. So without further ado, we'll get started. Our first presentation is on the new life-saving rules. And Anik, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, so this is pretty exciting. We're going to talk about the IOGP life-saving rules. They are now adopted by Post. They are industry standard. They are part of your training. So it's great. It's a great addition to the training. And during the session, we're going to talk about why we have the life-saving rules. We're going to also cover the rules one by one. And at the end, we're also going to cover a little bit on the intervention side of things. So next slide, please, Michelle. So what are the life-saving rules? Well, they are key actions to prevent fatal injuries during higher risk activities, but I would even say medium and low risk activities as well. So there are a few of them. They're very clear. There's 9 rules, not 50, as Michelle was alluding to. They are clear, they are simple, they are task level, and they are proactive, actionable, observable, and for the worker. I mean, if you look at the logos or the icons for each of those life-saving rules, they are very clear. It's easy to understand what they are about. And so they've made it so simple for you guys to be able to follow. And most of all, they are life-saving. And I'm putting the emphasis on life-saving because I want to talk about the next slide. So if you look at this, this is a pretty grim reminder that the rules are there for a reason. And according to the IOGP, in the last 10 years, 376 people might still be alive today if the life-saving rules had been followed. And so what that means is that really 376 people did not return to their families. And that is extremely sad to me. And so when we think about, more rules and whatnot, but they're really there for a reason. It's for you not to be added to this slide. And to me, they are something that I carry every day with me, and you should too. So let's have a look at the next slide. We're going to talk about, why they were developed. So why were this life-saving rule developed? Well, for the first thing is that they cover multiple scopes of work. So whether you are an HVAC technician, a petroleum technician, if you look at a retail site, there are so many types of equipment that need to be serviced. And so the rules really do cover any type of tasks that you could be taking over on the site. And it is catered for our industry. So it will cover tasks that are specific to oil and gas. And they are very clear. As we said earlier, there are 9 rules, simple icons, clear actions for individuals. All right, so before we get into the life-saving rules one by one, I just wanted to give you a reminder too, that if you're looking for material on the life-saving rules, you should have a look at the iogp.org website. They've got a ton of really great documentation on there. And one that I really wanted to put the emphasis on, sorry, if you want to, thank you, the poster. They have printables, and I just find that they are extremely important to have on hand. To me, this is a staple safety binder item. If you're often performing work on a petroleum site, this is the one that you want to have in your binder. And I'm a firm believer in having a good old binder with some sleeves. Put one in there so that you always have it as a reminder. This is also great for your toolbox talks, if you want to cover a rule, and even in a scenario where maybe you might have to intervene on someone who's performing a different task that you're not really used to or familiar with. At least this can give you a little bit of additional confidence in wanting to intervene. If you feel like maybe they're doing something unsafe, but you're not sure, you can actually refer to this. So I strongly encourage that you have this in your binder if you don't already. The other great tool is the YouTube video. So IOGP has a YouTube channel where they have one video where they cover all of the rules under one video, and then they have a rule in a minute. So again, really great for toolbox talks and safety meetings. All right, so let's get into the life-saving rules. And we'll start with the first one, which is bypassing safety controls. So when thinking of bypassing safety controls, think about things like fire and explosion mitigation systems, alarms, critical monitoring equipment, whose purpose is to prevent you from getting injured. So before you go ahead and bypass safety control, you really have to obtain authorization before overriding or disabling those safety controls. You need to understand what you're doing and the procedure that you need to take over to apply to this task, right? So obtain authorization before disabling or overriding safety equipment, deviating from a procedure, or crossing a barrier. All right, up next, we have confined space. I think sometimes we think of confined space as something that's not meant for human occupancy, because that's really the definition of confined space. And we also find sometimes that we think about something like a tank entry, but I also want you to think about something like an deep excavation where you have to get down in there, because that can also contain explosive gas and a toxic atmosphere. You should also consider dangers like energy releases, lack of oxygen, exposure to hazardous chemicals, and for something like an excavation, things can crush you or fall on you, right? So obtain authorization before entering a confined space. You have to confirm energy sources have been isolated. You have to confirm that the atmosphere has been tested and monitored. So bump test your monitors and monitor those LELs every 15 minutes. That's on your checklist. You have to check and use your breathing apparatus when it's required. You gotta have that thing fit tested and make sure you use it when required. and confirm that there is an attendant standing by. And this really goes hand in hand with confirming that you have a rescue plan in place. Do not underestimate the value of a very good rescue plan. You have to identify many things, like who is your first aid person. If you're the person going down the hole and you're the only first aid, that's really not helping you. So have a good plan in place. Make sure that you have someone competent that's going to be able to pull you out of there in case of an emergency. Make sure that you talk about the risks that you're about to take and obtain authorization to enter. We're going to talk about permitting a little bit later on, but you have to be competent to be holding a permit that will for performing confined space. And the person issuing it should be equally as competent, right? So we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. Driving. So it's funny, I had a safety moment yesterday on distracted driving, because April is actually Distracted Driving Awareness Month. And there are 29% of fatal, I actually wrote this down before this meeting. There are 29% of fatal collisions that are associated with distracted driving. 29%. That has now surpassed drunk driving at 23%, and 28% are caused by speeding. So this rule is extremely important, and it has its rights in the realm of the 9 life-saving rules. So always wear a seatbelt, do not exceed speed limit, and reduce your speeds, according to the road conditions. Do not use your phone at all. Just if you feel like you're going to be tempted to use it, just put it in a glove box, put it away, put it on mute. Do not use your phone or operate devices while driving. It is obviously a huge, it is the #1 now, like, cause of fatal collisions at 29%. So that's a pretty substantial number. And you got to make sure that you're fit and rested and fit for duty. If you're not feeling well, if you have someone that is, going for a drive with you and you're not feeling like you can drive, then just have them drive. Make sure that you're just fit for driving, and follow your journey management plan. This is more so if you were, say, driving long hours somewhere where you may not have access to cellular, you might not be at a cellular reach or something like that, and you're driving very long hours. People need to know where you are. And so if they can't reach you, they need to know sort of whereabouts you would be, and they need to be able to have an emergency contact. So this is what we talk about often when we talk about journey management requirements. Okay, energy isolation. So energy isolation really separates you from hazards, and it's not just electricity. It's about, in our line of work, it's about pressure releases. It's about, energized equipment. So verify isolation and zero energy before the work begins. So what does that mean? Is that it means that you've identified all energy sources, that you have confirmed that hazardous energy sources have been isolated, locked, and tagged. And tagged means not just putting a tag on the lock. It means putting your name, your phone number, the company you work for. Do not leave blank tags on the lock. And that you have checked that there is zero energy and tested for residual energy. This is why the icon has changed a little bit. And now you see a little meter on the left of the icon that says 0. This is what they've added to the rule, is that you have to make sure you test for residual energy. Okay, hot work. Really, hot work is any work that creates an ignition source performed in an area where there's hydrocarbon or flammable material, right? So when we think about what that means in terms of our line of work, it's welding, grinding, torching, and definitely no smoking, right? So you have to identify and control ignition sources. Before starting hot work, you confirm that flammable materials have been removed or isolated. You obtain authorization. And before starting hot work in a hazardous area, you have to make sure that a gas test has been completed and the gas will be monitored continually. Again, LEL meters, 15 minutes intervals, it's on your checklist. I can't, like this, the checklist, the post checklist go so well with all of these life-saving rules because they will walk you through it. So really make sure that you read those checklists. It will walk you through it. And this, so gas monitoring is on there and it's for you to use. And we're going to talk a little bit more about obtain authorization when we get to this slide, actually. Line of fire. Okay, this is a new one. And this rule definitely has its own rights to be within the life-saving rules, because this is an area where I know anyways for the client I work for, this was an area where people were constantly getting injured and sometimes even had fatalities, but it was kind of missed within their life-saving rules. And so line of fire was created because, first of all, traffic and moving vehicles are your #1 risk when you're working on a petroleum site. You have to have your head on a swivel at all times. When you're working in the forecourt, there's people going in and out of those stations, especially at peak hours. So you have to really be careful about traffic. That is your #1 concern. The other one is if you see the little logo with the dropped objects, you have to be cautious of that. And this is especially true for people who are performing work on the roof and have to bring their tools up the ladder or up on the roof, or even, you know, tossing things off of the roof. Like if you're a roofer and you have to, you know, start discarding of old roofing material, you have to secure your tools to make sure they don't fall. But you also have to make sure that you have a really good barricade to make sure that if they do fall by any, you know, if there was an incident where it fell, then it's not going to fall on someone or someone walking by, right? So allow yourself to have a good barricade, and that goes for all of it, for drop tools and traffic. And also you have to make sure that you're not in the line of fire for pressure releases, but establish a good barricade. That is going to be one of the things that you should really always think about, because whatever job you do, whichever trade you're in, you're going to need a barricade. So get in the good habit of giving yourself that extra buffer zone to be able to work in and make sure that you're safe and the people around you are safe. Okay, safe mechanical lifting. And that kind of goes with the line of fire as well, right? That one goes really well with it. So if you are planning on doing some lifts, you have to confirm that the equipment and load have been inspected and are fit for purpose. You only operate equipment that you're qualified to use. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this here. You are hiring a crane operator to do a lift for you. For us anyways, we ask for certification right away. I want to see the certification that this crane operator has a valid license to operate that unit, and you should too. We need to make sure that they are fit for duty to lift that load, that they have planned to and calculated the load, and that everything that they are supposed to do is up to par, right? Because you're not doing it, they are. You rely on them to know what they're doing, but you have to make sure that you follow. And if it's a critical lift, then you should have a very, very good lifting plan to go with that. Again, we talked about obeying barriers and exclusion zones. This is another great example of where you really need to allow yourself for a splash zone. You need to have a really good barricade in place. And for retail stores, what we usually do too is we work with the site attendants to make sure that they will be able to partially or fully close the site. If we're lifting something above the roof, we're going to make sure that they know that we are about to perform these operations, this task, and that they will actually also need to get out of the store while we perform the lift. And so again, planning is key when we talk about safe mechanical lifting. Barricading is key, and making sure that the people that you've hired to perform the lift are qualified to do so. Okay, so work with a valid permit when required, work authorization. So it's more than just a person in charge of signing a permit to work form, right? It's not just I need this additional form. This is an assurance that we have some very qualified people who are issuing and holding a permit. And you got to make sure that you know what you're doing when you're performing things that require work authorization. So you've confirmed that the permit is required, you're authorized to perform the work, you understand the permit. And this is why I'm saying qualified. If you're someone who just started last week, you shouldn't be holding a permit. The permit holder and the permit issuer should be people who are very used to and have the experience to take over this task. And you have confirmed that the hazards are controlled and it is safe to start. So make sure that when you have your permit issuer coming to see, the safety paperwork, that your hazards have been mitigated, they are controlled, you've filled out all of your safety paperwork, and it all works together. And then the permit issuer can feel confident in issuing the permit. And stop and reassess if the condition changes. If something that you're doing just changes, you have to stop what you're doing and make sure that you reassess it, because you may require now new paperwork for what you're doing. I think of something like you're going to do a shallow excavation, and all of a sudden you realize that, oh, actually this is turning into a deep excavation. The condition now has changed. Now we require a permit. Now we require to fill out a different checklist. So just LMRAs, and we're going to talk about this during the JSA, but this is why last minute risk assessments are so important too. So stop and reassess if the condition changes.
Howard, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to add, there's also other permitting required just in from a daily work permit to there's different types of permits as well, but they're still important as well. And that's part of this. What we're trying to say in this is that there's the work permit, there's the different types of permits that are required for the whole job and not just the permit to work.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Of course, yeah. So you should have that as well. Yeah. Okay, protect yourself against fall when working at heights. So the rule says I inspect my fall equipment before use. I secure tools and work materials to prevent dropped object, and I tie off 100% to approved anchor points while working outside a protected area. I can't stress this enough, especially the last one. I mean, we've already talked about securing tools and work material, and inspecting your fall protection should be done every time before use. Again, you have a post checklist for that, but tying off 100% is the one that I get hung up on, because I've seen workers in this industry knowing these rules full well and making a small decision to just not tie off. Oh, I just had to do this quick, and decided that they weren't going to need to tie off. So 100% to approved anchor points. Don't do it. The workers who fall from height get severely injured, and I've had to see reports and produce reports myself of these types of injuries, and it's no joke. So please tie off 100%. Okay, so how should you use the life-saving rules? Again, I think I covered that a little bit in the beginning of the presentation, but toolbox talks and safety meetings, always a great way to use your life-saving rules. For pre-job planning, last-minute risk assessment, post-job reviews. So, talk about, how did the job go? Did it go well? Do we need to, did we note anything that we could change for next time? Observations and walkabouts. I mean, as a senior health and safety manager, this is really where they come into play for me, right? So do I see anyone performing work where there's a life-saving rule that could potentially be violated, or are they doing a really good job? What kind of feedback can I give them on the life-saving rules? And the last thing is obviously stop the work if there's a life-saving rule that's been violated or that's been breached. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next slides regarding intervention.
Again, also, it's important to use these life-saving rules, as we're going to speak today on JSAs, that it's important to help them for you to develop your JSA.
Yeah, absolutely. They go hand in hand. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great review of the life-saving rules, Anik. Thank you for that. Just one comment, and there's been a few people that I've seen where they think that once they've taken the life-saving rules training, they think that they're now trained to enter a confined space or to wear a safety harness, and that they're trained for full protection. That is not the case. You still need to take the appropriate training for those types of jobs. So the life-saving rules are just sort of a review or a snapshot of things that you need to follow to prevent fatalities. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments, and I completely agree. And honestly, I could spend 90 minutes to 2 hours just even going even more in depth about the life-saving rules, because there's just so much to each rule. And like you said, yeah, under each of those rules and the bullet points, there's just so much more that goes beyond that. And like you said, the proper training is crucial for working at heights, confined space. Yeah, absolutely. Great comment.
And I'd like to make a comment on that. What you were talking about at the end there, observations and walkabouts, I can't stress how important those are when it comes to life-saving rules. How do we know our employees are following these life-saving rules unless we get out there and observe what they're doing out in the field? Because you will run into that employee that says, I just have a quick job to do on the roof. I'm not going to tie off. It'll take me 10 seconds. Well, that's 10 seconds is all it takes to have a critical or life-altering injury. So PJOs are very important. I can't stress it enough. Management needs to get out there, get out in the field and see what their employees are up to and what they're doing, as well as the health and safety officers of the companies.
We're going to talk about that even a little bit in the JSA and auditing safety paperwork. But yeah, I mean, nothing beats going at the site and seeing the guys and having a chat with them. And sometimes it's not so much as an intervention as hey, like, you've been doing a really good job. Have you thought of, this life-saving rule, or how knowledgeable are you, like with the ones that, like, which ones are you familiar with, which ones do you feel like you don't understand so much? Like, it's good to get a pulse on where they're at once in a while. So yeah, nothing beats going on site to do some audits.
Yeah, complacency will always bite us, so we have to get out there and we have to get in front of the employees and see what's going on.
Okay, so next slide, Michelle, before I move on to just a quick bit on intervention. Remember that the work does not start until you're aware of the life-saving rule, that you can confirm that you can follow them throughout, and that we're all authorized to intervene and stop the work if in doubt of a safety activity that, or we can't follow the rules. And the second point I really wanted to touch on, because, and if you want to go to the next slide, Michelle, it's about intervention. I think that often, and I host a lot of workshops on interventions because it's not something that's easy to do, right? Sometimes for a lot of people, this is something that's very uncomfortable to them. And I always kind of say that, choosing to intervene, yeah, it's kind of like the first step, but it just goes so much deeper than that, right? Because you're making a choice now. Okay, I think this is unsafe. I'm going to intervene. Now you have to walk up to the individual and say, okay, I think something's wrong here. hey, I'm concerned about what you're doing. You know, I feel like maybe there's something here that isn't quite right. I feel like you're at risk. And by saying these things, you know, you may be confronted with some resistance, right? It really depends on who you don't know what you're going to get. And I think that's part of why we get, you know, very uncomfortable about it, is that you just don't know how this is going to go down. But there are some really good ways that you can approach someone and just start with, I'm concerned, or hey, I'm so-and-so, and I just was looking at what you're doing. And sometimes I'll even start with something great that they're doing, like, oh, I see you're doing this. Well, it's, you know, it's awesome that they're finally fixing it, or, you know, like we'll have a quick chat, and then as long as they're not in an immediate danger, of course, right? But, you know, I'll start slowly and then just kind of build up to it so that they don't feel like I'm coming at them like, hey, what are you doing? Like, you know, you don't want to startle them. So you want to just kind of make sure that you're mentally prepared for what you're about to do, that you're pretty certain that they are, you know, maybe breaching something. But even if they weren't, it's okay. Then it's kind of a learning for you to understand why they're doing it in a certain way. There's no really right or wrong here. Just see it as an additional safety discussion with someone who's performing work at a site. And basically, the way I see it is that it's better to be uncomfortable or have an uncomfortable conversation with someone, because this could be the last opportunity you have to perhaps save someone's life. And this is really the takeaway here, is that you don't want to be the person who chose to look the other way and regrets that forever. Just remember, if you see someone you know, that looks like they may not be following the life-saving rules, it is your right to intervene. Any comments on this? I'm sure some people may have some comments.
Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, you know, great points, Nick, and what intervention is definitely not. It's a very uncomfortable thing for anybody to accomplish. So, the one thing that I try to keep in my mind is be positive when you're approaching, whether it be a customer, a contractor. I always start my interventions by saying, for your safety, or for your child's safety, if it's you know, someone's child running around the forecourt or is fueling a vehicle. That's why I always start off by saying, for your safety, for whomever's safety, we ask you to do this for these reasons, because it's all about, especially for our customers, it's about the knowledge, right? They just don't know. They don't know what the hazards are. So, but by starting it on a positive note, it will if you go in there and say, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're putting them on the defense right away, and it just goes from bad to worse in a situation like that. So, not saying that even if you approach it in a positive manner, it's going to work, but we need to do what we need to do. We have to intervene on unsafe acts. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that you know, we often say, like, don't use the you, just get used to saying I. So instead of saying like, what are you doing? You're doing this and this is wrong. Just say, hey, I'm concerned that maybe you're not doing something the way you should, you know, like, just make it about you and your concerns, and then for their safety, right? But just, you know, don't go crazy pointing fingers. It's probably not going to go well. All right, so that's all I had for this presentation, Michelle. I think the next slide is just, you know, thanking everyone for having me to go over the life-saving rules, and I hope you've learned a thing or two. But like I said, if you do your post training, it will give you some really good insights on what we just covered, and there's plenty of resources for you guys to learn more about it.
Great, thanks, Anna. Does anyone have any more comments or questions on the life-saving rules?
Good job, Nick.
Yep, you did a great job. No one has any questions.
Okay, good.
Great,
Nick
thank
out.
you. Oh, actually, we have, let's see here. Is this possible? We have access to a downloadable file. Yes, so there are some great resources on the IOGP website that you can download a poster or even the card to get them printed.
Did they mean the presentation or the life-saving rules? Yeah.
So yes, we'll have the presentations available. We'll have all of these presentations available. We're also recording them, so we'll have them for video as well.
I think Grant had a question as well, and Michelle, just above that. Is there a difference between safe worker and a qualified worker?
Well, it should be both.
True.
I think they go hand in hand.
Yeah, they kind of do. But yeah.
You can be safe and not qualified, right? It's
Yeah, but yeah, I think they're all available in French, right, John? Or Michelle?
So I think they're available in 15 languages, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, go on the IOGP website. I'm sure you can find them in French.
There's also a link through the post website as well.
Oh, thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, great. And as Anik said, we cover all the life-saving rules with examples in the post courses as well. Okay, so moving on. Next, we would like to present a new initiative we are working on and here at Post that we think will benefit both the contractors and the retailers. It's Post for Site Operators. So for the purpose of the course, we are using the term site operators, but encompassing anyone on the retail site. So gas station attendants, dealers, wholesalers, retailers, etc. They're all used interchangeably in this course. And we'll also use the terms contractors, workers, technicians interchangeably as well. So one of the first things we know and want to convey to retailers is that companies and their employees prefer to follow a consistent safety program like Post, regardless of their client or customer. So basically, to have this level playing field. Workers are required to follow safe work procedures by law, and the Post program was designed to enhance the occupational health and safety laws already in place. So already it's a no-brainer. As you know, we have 2 levels of Post, level 1 for new workers and level 2 for supervisors. But we also encourage everyone that has taken level 1 in the past, take level 2 going forward. It provides a more in-depth knowledge of Post requirements based on a supervisor and leadership perspective. There are definitely what we call fringe industries, like landscapers, non-petroleum companies, where level 1 is fine, but for the most part, we encourage everyone to take level 2, where we cover more of the leadership qualities with respect to enforcing site rules and Post requirements, improved hazard identification and mitigation skills when completing JSAs, and critical thinking when performing planned job observations and hazard identification.
Michelle, if I could just add a point.
Of course.
There's some confusion around leadership qualities and things like that I find in the industry. And leadership doesn't mean only management, but it means us as individuals leading the charge, leading the safety program. So again, people may see that leadership qualities there under Post 2. We're all leaders once we've taken this course, and we all have a responsibility to make sure that everybody on our sites work safely. So again, just want to make sure that we understand what we mean by leadership qualities.
And even going back to Anik's point with intervention, it doesn't have to be the supervisor or the health and safety manager coming on site. It's not just their responsibility to find any issues and intervene. It's everyone's responsibility.
And I've seen a huge shift, I've got to admit, over the last 10, 15 years with, the more that our contracts are becoming aware of health and safety and the intervention on site. I've been in situations where I pulled onto a site and I've seen a contractor intervene with one of our customers, which I thought was fantastic. That's the level that we're getting to. And I really hope that, this course would even take that even a little bit further with our service champions or our site operators.
Yeah, so, for many years, oil companies have also encouraged the retailers and site operators to take Post, so they'll understand the requirements that contractors follow. We've also had many discussions about having a separate Post course for companies that are, not involved in petroleum work per se, but take Post because, they're still coming onto the sites. We went through an exercise of creating a possible new version, what we called Post Lite, but found there was really nothing we wanted to take out without affecting the integrity of the course. So we really saw no point in moving forward at that time. However, for those site operators or retailers taking post, did they really understand their role and responsibility, and was this really conveyed in the course? Not really, because post is designed for the contractor's perspective, so it's not really speaking to the site operator. So when it came to retailers and site operators taking post, we realized, we had this opportunity to convey not only all the safety requirements, contractors must follow, but what the site operators' responsibilities are when a contractor is doing work on the site. This is where we agreed a new course specifically geared towards site operators made sense. There are also additional opportunities to include, things a site operator should know, such as record keeping, forecourt hazards, and emergency response. But most importantly, that communication with the contractor on site.
And yeah, communication is being the key word here. We really want our site operators and contractors to have that open communication, to be able to relay on pertinent information that could affect either the site operations or the contractor safety. And a great example of that would be, let's say we had a contractor working around the tank farm, could be in an STP or maybe doing an ATG probe or something of that nature. But at the same time, there's a fuel delivery coming within that same hour. So having those open discussions, when the contractors are on site and so the site and the contractors are knowing what each other are doing and what to expect goes a long way. And that's one of the things that we want to include in that course.
I think if something goes wrong on a site, it's good that everybody's on the same page, including the operators and the contractors.
100%.
Exactly. So time will be spent in the course going over the post documentation. As part of the site operator's responsibilities with respect to post requirements is understanding the contractor's responsibility to complete the necessary documentation before starting any work. We've often heard from contractors where the retailer is wondering, why is the technician sitting in their vehicle or, spending so much time on paperwork? So we want to ensure it's understood the contractor is taking their time, filling out their JSA or maintenance safe work permit to ensure they're mitigating, all the risks, including any critical procedures, before starting their work. In conjunction with the documentation is also a reminder to site operators, they should ensure they retain all service documents, warranty records, fuel reconciliation, leak detection records. Site operators should also work with their contractor to maintain these records and have them readily available. Could be requested by a local inspector, emergency service personnel, or fire marshal in any case, or in case of emergency or incident. Warranty and service records are also important to maintain, so contractors understand the equipment that is installed on the site. They also provide a history of previous issues with equipment, could help a service technician troubleshoot new issues more effectively. So, record keeping is really critical. We're also addressing in the course the many forecourt hazards and site operators should be cognizant of. Well, fuel-related incidents at the pumps have been greatly reduced due to state-of-the-art equipment. Everyone, including site operators and contractors working on the site, need to be aware of the hazards and risks on the forecourt. So while the public poses probably the biggest risk on a forecourt or even inside the C-store for a technician, we also remind the site operators to maintain good housekeeping and properly store hazardous materials and keeping them in their original containers. Car wash and commercial cleaning products can be harmful if anyone is exposed through spillage or leaking containers. They can lead to respiratory problems, serious skin irritations, and even chemical burns. They should also obtain and keep on hand the safety data sheets, the information all substances stored and used on the premises, and ensure staff have WMIS training and provide appropriate protective clothing.
We should highlight, you mentioned cell phone use, and it's right on the as one of the hazards. With a lot of the majors now having, being able to use the mobile app on the forecourt, it gets a little difficult to know, when they're just using the app or when they're actually on their phone. So it's just, it's one of those things that we have to be mindful of because, the cell phone itself is not the hazard with, it's not a fire hazard, but it is totally a distraction. I can show you all kinds of video of people on their phones and they just lose all awareness of what they're doing at the pumps. So we have to, and going back to my point earlier, where I've seen contractors intervening on site. So that's what we just have to be mindful of cell phones for sure.
Yeah, they may think, well, they're allowed to use them now because they're using it to, pay at the pump.
Exactly.
Yeah, so they might ignore them
Yeah.
using them while they're refueling.
Yeah, absolutely.
So while site operators doing their job to minimize hazards inside and outside of the service station, there are several ways a service contractor will mitigate the hazards on the forecourt when they're on a call. So they'll use communication, documentation, PPE, barricading, emergency procedures, and just to ensure that, they're mitigating those hazards.
And back to that, back to intervention, Michelle. So thanks. While our post contracts do a great job of keeping themselves, customers, and our site staff or service operators safe, there are times, and I think we've all seen it, where and I think Nick, you even mentioned it, where there's times where you're cutting corners because it's a quick job. You're in, you're out. And in fact, I was just at a site just a couple weeks ago where a technician came in, didn't announce who he was, just started working on one of the coolers, taking off the front. You got exposed motors in there. You've got all kinds of sharp edges. Didn't have a barricade up of any kind. Didn't even have his gloves on. So I intervened right away. So we had a nice little chat. And then after that was done, he did his job. Off he went. And then I had another discussion with the site operator, saying, like, you need to feel empowered. And this is the reason for this course is we have to get to that level where our we don't expect our service operators, our service champions or site operators to be technicians. But if they see an unsafe act, they absolutely need to intervene to keep it, again, just to keep everybody safe. It should be going both ways.
We also discuss emergency response plans and that the site operator should be prepared to assist if there's an emergency involving the contractor. So it's important the contractor discuss the work being done with the site operator and the procedures in place in case of an emergency. The contractor may need the site operator's assistance evacuating the site or forecourt, calling 911, monitoring traffic in and out of the site, or even the forecourt.
And again, back to a point that Nick made was, should we, having those open discussions, and if we know why the contractors are on site, we can actually incorporate the service site operators into that rescue plan that may be required, whether it be a phone call, isolate the site. It's an extra set of hands, extra set of eyes. Again, I think it's a great part of this course and one that should serve us well, and as long as it's reciprocated both ways.
It's the simplicity of just even pushing an emergency stop button. So it can be
Oh goodness, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Lastly, we also just want to emphasize that, it's important for retailers to know that safety does not cost them more. It's a misconception that working safely costs more money. In fact, the opposite is true. So retailers need to know that having a contractor that follows such a stringent safety program, it shows the caliber and quality of the company they're using to maintain their service station. So safety doesn't cost extra. It saves both the retailer and contractor money. And, there are a multitude of reasons why this is true. So, workers are more knowledgeable of their tasks, more efficient, therefore less time is spent on the call, improved productivity on the work site when all workers are more comfortable in the safe execution of their task. Proper planning will reduce potential for downtime. And it also ensures that the workers are using proper procedures and tools to ensure the work is done safely. So this is something that we will, stress as well in the course. So our message is that both site operators and contractors must work together, to keep everyone safe on the site. We are hoping to launch the course within the next few months. So again, this is something that will hopefully benefit, the contractors and just, heighten that awareness. Are there any questions with respect to, this course specifically? I know we had another question. Someone is asking when will the downstream retail contractor orientation be updated?
I just didn't really understand that question.
Yeah, I'm not
they
sure.
elaborate a little bit on what they meant by that. Grant, if you can make some comments on that, we'd appreciate just having a little bit more information on what you're meaning by the question.
Or come off mute if it's easier.
I'm going to, Grant, go ahead.
Thank you very much for recognizing me. A couple of days ago, we had our safety training day with, or online safety training with one of our suppliers, which is Shell Global Safety Training. And we were told that the downstream retail contractor orientation training that is currently available is not being pushed because it's considered outdated, and there is new training that is expected to come to fruition. I was just wondering if that was in the works.
You said for the Shell contractor orientation?
Yes, a couple of days ago, we had, let me go into my calendar to give you the correct name of the.
If you're referring to the Shell retail orientation training, that one is no longer required, correct?
Yeah, so it will not be replaced then?
It will not be replaced because we were able to come to an agreement that the Shell retail orientation training really was about the life-saving rules, and now that Post has adopted them, we saw little value in keeping the training, and so we were able to discontinue the need for that requirement.
Well,
However, Grant,
thank you very much for the clarification. I appreciate that.
However, Grant, this site operators that does help in assisting to give more detail, I think, than what the previous training was. So this is an option for them to take in lieu of what they took out.
Well, I think there's two different things, Howard. I think what Grant was talking about was Shell had a contract orientation that all contractors had to take before getting onto a Shell site. So for our facilities maintenance side of things, yeah, we have discontinued that because BJS is going to do some training with their L3s and 4s and whatnot to kind of compensate for what we've taken out of that. For discontinuing that program, because yeah, the bulk of it was the life-saving rules. I think our EPCM who build our sites, that side of the business is still going to utilize it. But for the facilities side, BGS contractors, whatnot, yeah, that's no longer a requirement.
Thank you, Jim.
You're very welcome. Good question.
Okay, so hopefully if there's 9 more questions, we'll move on to the next presentation. Okay, Anik, you're back up.
I'm unmuted too. I'm good. Okay, great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're here for you though, and
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know you are.
We're your support team.
Yeah, you better be there for me. This is team effort here. Effective JSAs. Okay, listen, you guys, I love JSAs so much. And I'm glad we're covering this because I find that it's a great topic. And the thing about JSAs is that from my perspective and some of the perspective maybe of others on the call, this is giving me a real clear picture about where a technician is at safety-wise. Within 30 seconds, I can scan a JSA and come up with some sort of an idea of where you're at with your safety. And it could be that you need more training. It could be that you're extremely good at identifying hazards and controls. Or it could be that, maybe there's some complacency. But the reason why we're having this forum and talking about JSAs is because we're going to cover a couple of things. And can you just go to the next slide, Michelle? Before I regress, I just want to keep it in order. So we're going to talk about potential issues with JSAs. So there's a couple of things that we see often, one being using a JSA for multiple tasks, and the other one that comes back often as a question is removing PPE for specific activity. Then we're going to get into the conversation of starter JSAs. So what's great about starter JSAs and what's might not be so great, or that you want to consider before going a starter JSA route. And then the third thing is I've come up with a compilation of my top 4 JSA do's and don'ts, which is basically some of the most common JSAs that I see out there that would definitely need a little bit of help. So we're gonna go through that later on in the session. So first slide. You can skip that one. Yeah, okay, great. So first issue is using one JSA for multiple tasks. So in this, for this example, you can see that it says line replacement and island replacement and concrete cutting. That's a whole lot of stuff to be putting under one JSA, right? So the intent of a JSA is for a single task, and it's really for you to break it up into manageable bites, right? If you've got 30 steps or 50 steps on a JSA, you're trying to cram everything in there, it's going to be very hard for you to keep up with it, and also being able to maybe edit some things here and there while you're performing the work, right? It's going to become very complicated for the workers and the crew to follow through. And I think that sometimes people think that because there's a daily renewal that it's okay for them to just kind of put it all in there, because it's like, oh, well, I'm going to be on the site doing all of it for 5 days, 7 days. So I'm just going to, you know, just use the daily. This is what the daily renewal is intended for, but that's really intended for the renewal again of the same task.
It's really hard to manage the mitigations and the of a task if you put too many tasks together. It's so hard to make sure that you're using the right procedures or the right mitigations in order to be safe when we're doing these tasks.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost. Plus, you've got technicians sort of working on one side of the task, and then there's other ones working on some other task. And so it's like, how do you, you know, it just becomes very fragmented, and it's definitely not how what the intent is.
Yeah, one of my rules of thumb is that, you know, it can be, most jobs can be described in less than 10 steps, 10 steps or less, okay? I think if you're going over that, then you might want to have a separate JSA or a second JSA, and or combine the steps where appropriate, right? But yeah, you've noted there, if your JSA is 30 steps, it will be hard to manage, very hard to manage. Yeah,
5 to 8, they say, is the right amount. So somewhere between 5 to 8 per task. That's why it's so important to be per task.
the current post JSA, sorry, Anek, is 8 steps, right? Unless you go to a second page.
Yeah, and I mean, it really does say task / activity. It's not asking you for the whole project. Right? So it's about,
yeah, and that's why we updated the, you know, the JSA, just the top part, to say that it's you know, safety plan for site tasks and activities, and that multiple JSAs may be required if several tasks are involved.
exactly. Right, next slide, please. Okay, so things to consider. You want to determine what the JSA is for. So what is the task? What's the activity? How many steps are involved? Activities performed in separate location on the site, not on the same JSA. But you can have multiple critical checklists on the same JSA though. You know, so there might be a time where you need a vacuum and you need to do, like for this example here, you've got vacuum and remove submersible pumps from tanks. So you've got ground disturbance and vacuum included in the critical procedures. And that's great. You can have more than one critical procedure per JSA. It happens all the time. You've got, you know, someone working on the pump or something, it'd be lockout, tag out, and maybe hot work or something, it happens. But another thing that we kind of wanted you to consider is your critical checklists are also a control. So like, if you are in the middle of writing up your JSA and you're saying, okay, I'm going to have to, you know, vacuum out the tank bottom and lines, then in your controls, you know, it's encouraged to just put in, I will be filling out my vacuum checklist. You know, so that way it's kind of outlined in there that it's one of your controls. Oh yeah, this actually was a really hot topic even when we were building this slide. We spent a long time on this. So removing PPE for a specific activity. So you know, there's multiple reasons for you to want to sometimes have to remove it or have to remove a PPE. More often than none, it's about dexterity with, you know, using fine motor skills and having to remove your gloves, or it's, you know, I have to sort of stand in a very awkward way and my helmet, you know, is in the way or something. So I think one of the things that came up the most was this shouldn't really be used very often. This should be your worst case scenario. You have to be removing your gloves, and you really have to ask yourself, if you continuously have to use this box, is it because there is no other way for you to do it? Or is it because maybe you have to get better PPEs? The answer may not really rely on the fact that you have to remove your gloves. It might rely on the fact that you don't actually have the proper gloves to do the task. So the first thing you should ask yourself is, am I actually equipped with the right PPEs to perform the work? If the answer to that is yes, then I guess in some instances you would have to remove your gloves, and that's why there's a space for it. If you would have to remove your helmet, I guess you could put it in the same space because there's not another section for it. So that was one of the things we talked about, right, Howard, like where there was not like, yeah.
Correct. I mean, there's a lot of choices when it comes to PPE for the right task. And we sometimes try to make it simple for ourselves and just say, well, I just can't do it with that, with a set of gloves or a particular piece of PPE. Therefore, we just want to put in here, well, yeah, I got to remove it. But we just want to encourage people to really look to see if there is a better piece of PPE that can be used to hopefully protect you better than removing, because the removing is a last resort.
Yeah, one of the problems that we've run into in the last 2 years during COVID is the wearing of masks and the fogging of safety glasses. So the simple solution was to source a safety glass that didn't fog, a pair of safety glasses that didn't fog up. So we were able to find those. They work very well, and you know, we substituted the old safety glasses for the new fog-free ones, and you can still wear a mask with the safety glasses. So I think that's where we're going with this conversation, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
and bring things forward to your company, and don't be afraid to the new ideas of new safety equipment is, I think, always nice to hear from the people that are out in the field and say, look, I found this and it'll help us do the job better or safer. And they will, I don't know any of them that won't implement new equipment that is, to your comment, Mike, that helps you do your job better.
Yeah, helps the worker, exactly.
And we talked about if we saw trends where, you know, if you're doing your, you know, JSA quality, and you're going through and you're seeing these trends where they're consistently removing, you know, their hard hat or gloves for the same thing, then yeah, you need to find a solution for, you know, a better solution, a better tool, or a better way of doing it. We do have a couple of questions. So please share where and what brand of fog-free safety glasses you found. So yes, we will we'll find that source and share that.
My favorite ones are the 3M Solus anti-fog glasses. They are foam back too, which is amazing. I mean, I think most technicians nowadays, foam back glasses are great. They just give you that additional seal, you know, around the eye to make sure that small particles don't get in there. And these glasses will, like I've worn them in the field with, you know, my mask, and they work really, really, really good. And I think there was a couple of other ones that were, that were suggested during one of our LCSC meetings. So I can kind of dig up some stuff too for you, Michelle, to share. But those ones definitely work really, really well.
Great.
I can check my PO to find out the ones that I have as well, but I know the 3M ones are excellent. Yeah.
We also have, thanks for that question, Carol. Someone is asking if you're the general contractor and hire a vacuum truck company to complete work for you, is it the general contractor's responsibility to complete the JSA and or the critical checklist for the vacuum truck?
Yeah, they should have their own set of safety paperwork.
And the post-vac truck checklist as well.
Yes, sorry, yes, that's what I meant, sorry. Like,
it also depends on the contractor you're hiring. Not all vac truck companies are post train that come on to site, and a lot of areas you don't have much choice on who you can use, and if they're not capable or trained, then you have to do the post orientation with them and work through the paperwork with them in those situations where those companies are not trained.
I know for us, they have to be, but I know sometimes maybe in situations where it'd be remote or we'd have to, use someone, use someone that we're not familiar with. But yeah, in most cases, we try to use companies who has post-trained employees.
JSAs are to be filled out by the workers. So if that worker is the vac truck operator that you're hiring, and he's the only one that's going to be on site, then he should be filling this out. If he can't, then it should be with the contractor in conjunction with the contractor.
Right, let's go to the next one. Any other comments before we move on from this one for removing PPEs for specific activities?
I don't think so, but whenever hard hat has to be removed, I always tell people they have to keep it within their reach. So typically, if you go into a C-store and you need to get underneath the counter to do something, might be the computer or something you're looking at, there's a lot of stuff underneath the counter. You can't get your head in there with a hard hat on. So as long as you take that off, put it on the counter and make note of it on your JSA, I'm okay with it. But other than that.
Yeah, in a dispenser or something like that too.
Yeah, the bottom of the dispenser is hard to get into too.
Yeah.
You have a picture of one of our trainers when we did a training video, and he's wearing a hard hat, and his head's in the dispenser. So it is feasible. I guess it depends on the type of dispenser.
Size of your head too makes a difference. Yes, Rick.
I was just gonna say that, Howard. With my melon, it'd be difficult to get it out.
Yeah, same here.
If you got a haircut once in a while, Rick, it might be okay.
Well, Rick's
I
hair,
know.
Rick doesn't need a
This is
hard
why.
hat. His hair
This is why.
protects him.
This is why.
The
If you keep
Italian
it
grease.
good, it fits.
Italian grease.
All right, let's move on to starter JSAs. Instead of Rick's hair. Okay. All right, so benefits of starter JSAs, pre-JSAs. I hear canned JSAs, I don't like that word, but starter JSAs, the benefits of it is that it develops best practice for completing quality JSAs. It's you can learn from them, to understand sort of how you are supposed to fill them out, especially for someone who's in a new position working for a company where they didn't used to fill out JSAs before. It can be a very good teaching tool. And it's a great starting point for the crew, when they're about to, that they can review prior to doing their tasks. And I've put the emphasis on starting point because it is still a live document. A starter JSA is not the be all end all, and then it's like, oh, that's it. Nothing changes once it's written. It's actually a live document, and it's a starting point for you to give, and it's also good if you have a really big project and you really need to think about the tasks and you need to really make sure that you have everything in order. A starter JSA is obviously a lot, better, so it gives you more time than if you were just at site trying to fill out the documents before starting the job, right? So you just also have that extra time to really think about it, and even maybe involve some of your crew members, to build it with. So let's go to the next slide and talk about this a little bit more. So things to consider, start by comparing JSAs for the same tasks and identify common or repetitive tasks. Involve the workers and technicians in the process. And yeah, I mean, if you have a starter JSA, you should still involve the workers in that and having tailgate meetings about it. And if you want to just go to the next slide, Michelle, this is sort of a way that I've talked about it before, and I've recommended this to contractors before, is if you're going to be using a pre-JSA, leave some blank spaces for the text to fill out, so that it can actually be part of your toolbox talk or your kickoff meeting, right? Is actually give the opportunity to your crews to be involved in that and engaged, right? This is a really, really good way to create that engagement that you want, and giving the opportunity for other workers to show that they also understand the potentials, the potential hazards, and they also know what the control should be, right? So
the other thing we talked about is not the same blanks all the time. Like the blanks need to move around so that they have different for the same task or even on the same job site, that it's not always filling in the same blanks. It's different blanks in different areas so that they're thinking about different things all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And just remember too that with pre-JSAs, and I've seen this a lot, is just don't forget that if you've got condition changes or certain things change, fix them on your JSA, because I've seen safety paperwork where I'd be like, oh, you said you were going to do lockout tagout, so where's, oh, it was from yesterday's JSA, I forgot to take it out, right? So we get that a lot too, is there's things that are changing, but the JSA didn't, right? So again, I will say it again, it's a live document, so it's meant to be changed, and there are things that should be added to it, and it's not set in stone type of thing, right? If the weather conditions are changing, if you've got different crew members, you've got different critical procedures, there's a whole ton of things that could be happening by the time you bring that starter JSA to site. So just keep that in mind.
And if we forget to change with what's happening on the site, it could be the difference between getting hurt and not getting hurt.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. We've just started our annual PMs for a major oil company, and we had a safety meeting last week where we addressed the starter JSA that we have for the PM. So what we've asked the technicians to do is review it and initial it and change it. Like you said, that's a very important point, that this is a living document. It can be changed at any time. So we have a JSA for the PMs. Okay, that's fine for one site. We go to another site, all of a sudden they've got a Tim Hortons drive-through. That creates a whole new, ball game and more hazards at the site. So you need to update the JSA to reflect at what's going on at the site that you are. And you made a good point. You could be working with someone different the next day. So it's important to review them. Even it's not just a piece of paper to print and to throw in with your paperwork at the end of the day. You need to pay attention to the list of the hazardous activities, the potential hazards, and the safety controls to eliminate these. So pay attention to your JSA.
Someone made a great mention of LMRAs too. And yes, absolutely. I mean, your last minute risk assessments will definitely make you go back to your JSA and see if you need to change things as well while you're putting in your LMRAs in there.
Yeah. The maintenance safe work permit goes hand in hand with the JSA, because on the maintenance safe work permit is a last minute risk assessment, right, to complete on there. So, and that's what we have. Any two-man crew, we have them do last minute risk assessments on each other. And part of the tailgate toolbox meeting before they start the job for the day is reviewing the JSA.
Like Anik said, it's, you know, it's a starter JSA. It's not a canned, you know, don't, you know, have, you know, your, you know, JSA prepared for a task and laminate it and have it ready for that. You know, conditions changes, everyone has said, you know, even if you're doing the same activity, you know, there's different hazards. So, you know, we've heard stories as well. Probably doesn't happen as often, you know, now, but, you know, where the HSSC manager's going on site and they've asked to see their JSA and they have it in the binder laminated. So.
That's not a JSA.
Right. Derek from ECS would like to share his JSA. I'm not sure, we'd have to kind of close out this presentation so and give you control. So maybe we can do that at the end.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, so anyways, again, remember that the JSA is live. We've talked about it, right? So it needs to be reviewed and altered if need be. Next one is something I put together for you guys called the do's and don'ts. So
Your favorite part.
my favorite, my first two, the one word JSA, okay? I see this so much. Okay, you've got park, traffic, barricade, you know, every step is just a one word thing. You have to be more descriptive than that. It's leaving everything up for interpretation here. Because if you're putting, for instance, the second one I put ladder, what does this mean? Where is the ladder? Where are you setting up the ladder? Are you going up it? What does that mean? Are you in the C-store? Are you outside? What are you doing with that ladder? Right? So I need a little bit more of you know, of description on this. And same with controls. I mean, typically you wouldn't have just one control per task. You know, there might be some tasks where you have like maybe one or two controls, but typically, you know, you should really, this is where you should have some writing to do, right? The second one is I call the everyone's a doctor JSA. And actually, Michelle made me realize that the second one is actually the signature of Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is really funny. I was just trying to find some scribbles to show you guys, but what I mean by that is, you know, it's really hard for me as a health and safety auditor to try to decipher what you've been trying to tell me, right? So make sure that if you are writing your daily safe work permit or your maintenance safe work permit in your JSA, just try to be a little bit cleaner.
It's just not about auditing. It's also about the rest of the workers that are on the site trying to understand what we're, first of all, what are we actually doing and how are we going to, what hazards there might be and how are we going to be safe to either reduce them or eliminate these hazards. We have no idea what we're really doing. So everybody now at the site has no idea really what this task is and really how we're going to be safe. We're just going to wing it. That's what it really looks like.
Yeah, and you know, you really just did raise a really good point, Howard, is the person filling out the JSA is really the one that's signing up saying, I made this with my crew, but like ultimately they're the one responsible for everyone's safety and recognizing the hazards and the controls. If your JSA looks like the first one or the second one, you know, I wouldn't want to be part of your crew. You know, like you have to make sure that you have something solid, well thought after.
And if you're working with somebody relatively new, this is just
absolutely
not help them at all to be safe and help them learn the proper way to do something safely.
You're not setting a good precedence, that's for sure. Yeah, they're just already starting on the wrong foot, which is super unfortunate.
They're new and they don't understand one of the safety controls and they miss it. You know, something serious can happen.
They don't even understand the steps of what the job that you're asking them to help with. And
Yeah,
they
that's a
need to
scary
be able to
thing.
understand the steps of the job as well as what kind of hazards. And they can't participate if they don't really know what the steps are. They can't participate in saying, well, what about this? Like, how can, this doesn't look safe, or why don't we do this and this could be safer? And sometimes even the new guy comes up with ideas that you don't see yourself because you've been doing it 10 times and you've never thought of that one thing.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think that one word, JSA, just screams, you need more training. You know, an effective JSA can be used for training for new employees. And something that we've incorporated is a drop-down menu for hazards and safety controls so they can select, and that eliminates, you know, not being able to read them if they're actually writing them out themselves. Is typically when someone's writing out one of these, if they're just writing it by hand, you know, they're standing with using a clipboard or on their steering wheel or on their center console of the truck or something, and you know, they're not sitting at a desk where they can actually write it out so that you're able to read it. So
I mean, it's a toss up for me with these ones, because I find that I see it in lack of training, but also complacency. Where someone's just not in the mood to fill out paperwork and they just really go, you know, they just do the half of it and that's it, right? I'll show you one that to me indicates a lack of training. If you want to just move to the next one, Michelle.
Grant had a good comment there, Michelle, if you could share.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, Grant just said, I like to think of the JSA as a commitment to work safe, a commitment from everyone to each other. Absolutely, 100%.
Oh, yes.
That's a good
Great
comment.
way, yeah,
Thank
it's a
you
great
for
way
that,
of
Grant.
putting it.
Yeah, and the next one that I see often, and this is typically what tells me someone needs to be retrained, is the mix and match JSA. So, you know, they're putting basically the safety controls where the job steps should be, you know, and you know, they're just mixing the columns up, and it's probably because they don't understand, you know, how it works and the sequence of it, or they just, they're new to it, or they need to be retrained. But I see the mix and match typically on newer technicians. And so in this one, I was just showing how, like, he put set up the barricade and the basic job steps, where really barricade is your control, right? So having the barricades up are your control, and setting up your work zone is your step, and the potential hazards of the customer. So anyways, I was just kind of trying to show you that there are some technicians that will confuse sort of the sequence of the job steps versus potential hazards and safety control. So watch out for those. And then the last one, but not least, is the one word fits all JSA. And so I see this all the time, where it's, you know, arrive at site and it's slip, trip, PPE, slip, trip, PPE. It's like, it's the same word just being repeated. And really, it's not covering much. If you're saying PPE, I understand we all have to wear 5 PPEs, but you know, there are specific tasks that you have on there, a sequence of job steps that you have on there that require you to be a little bit more specific about what type of PPEs you're going to be putting on, right?
And the big one is always gloves. I mean, there's so many types of gloves that we need to wear for different tasks. So it's the easiest one that comes to mind to me is gloves is a PPE, but there's a large variety of what is needed for the right task.
Yeah, is it cut resistant? Is it, you know, for chemical burns? Like, what is it for? Is it nitrile? What are you using, right? I think that those are some of the things that you wanna look into a little bit. Next slide, please. All right, so this is a good example, and I'm pretty sure that's one taken from the post JSA samples, right, Michelle?
Yes.
So as you can see, you know, this is for changing a filter. There's a really nice sequence of steps here on how they're going to do this. There's a lot of potential hazards listed. And of course, you know, you might have slip trip a couple of times, or you might have certain potential hazards that come back. I'm not saying that, you know, you don't have some of the hazards that aren't repetitive, that could be, but as you can see, there's a variety of potential hazards depending on where they are within the JSA. And the safety controls, same here. There's quite a few items that are being listed. So to me, when I see this from an auditor perspective, I'll see it and say, okay, this person really understands safety and, you know, cares about being safe and cares about the well-being of others. But like someone mentioned, like this is safety leadership, right? So this is sort of how I wanted to approach this. I wanted to keep it very light on the JSAs, but just kind of remind you that this is very important for you to fill this out properly. It will help you not getting injured, and it's the truth. Like, you can think, oh, a piece of paper is not going to save me from getting hurt. Actually, I beg to differ. If you do your analysis and you really think about your hazards and ways to mitigate it, you have a far better chance at not getting injured. So really think about your JSA as your assurance to do the work safely.
It's Renee here. I'd like to just mention what Kevin House said in the chat there about workers should be challenged to make PPE the last thing written down. Based on the hierarchy of controls, that there are many other things, measures that workers can take in advance before they just simply quickly scribble down PPE as the last line of defense. Thought that was a good one.
It is. It's at the bottom of the triangle, right? So
Right. That's in level 2, the hierarchy of controls. So
yeah, it's at the bottom of the triangle.
There's another comment there about language and that it's hard for them to write this out in English. There's nothing saying that this has to be written in English. It just has to be understood by all workers at the site. And if that means you have to write it in 2 different languages in order for all parties to understand, and then I think I would recommend that you take that practice. But there's nothing stopping anybody from writing in whatever language that the workers understand and can work with the best.
Yeah, it's really the intent is for you to identify and control your hazards. So if it has to be in your own language, that's okay. But yeah, it's important for you to do it nonetheless, right? Thank you.
Thank you again, Anik, for leading that. That was great, and thank you everyone for all of your comments.